Today we are going to see a mediation conducted in an Australian family law matter. The mediation will be a co-mediation, so we will have two mediators, Ms Susana Staka and Mr Maurice Edwards, both experienced family law mediators. They are mediating a dispute between a married couple, Phil and Keiko. Phil is an Australian. He is an IT specialist. In 2004, he was transferred in his employment to Japan, where he met Keiko. Phil and Keiko married in 2005, and their first child, Izzy, was born in 2006. They continued to live in Japan until 2012, when Phil was transferred back to Australia. Keiko and Izzy came back with him, and their second child, Jimmy, was born 6 months later. However, stresses on the marriage led Phil and Keiko to separate under the one roof 3 months ago. They continue to live in the same house today. Keiko initiated today's mediation, and she is here with her lawyer, Mr Michael Todd. Phil is here with his lawyer, Ms Jackie Vincent. Both lawyers are experienced family lawyers. The mediation starts with the mediators meeting with the parties and their lawyers together.
Well, welcome everyone here today. My name is Susana Staka and I'm one of your mediators today. Sitting with me is Maurice Edwards, if I could introduce him to all of you, and Maurice will be mediating with me. Keiko, you may not have had the opportunity yet of meeting Phil's lawyer, Jackie Vincent. If I could introduce you. Yeah. And Phil, you may not have had the opportunity yet of meeting Keiko's lawyer, Michael Todd.
Hello.
We find during these mediations it's most comfortable for everyone here if we're working on first name basis. Is that okay with you, Keiko?
Yes.
Is that all right with you, Phil?
Yes.
Today has come about because your respective lawyers, Michael and Jackie, have approached us about this mediation. They've each provided Maurice and I with some general and basic facts about your circumstances and a very short summary of your respective positions. We've set 2 hours aside today. Is that suitable to you, Keiko?
Yes.
And is that suitable to you?
Yes, thanks.
Good. So you both know, Maurice and I are both lawyers, but our role today is not to be your legal advisors. We won't be giving you any advice on the technical aspects of the law. Our role today is to mediate and to assist Keiko, you and Phil come to your own decisions about your case. We will be impartial at all times, and our objective is to facilitate you both looking at options and hopefully coming to an agreement today. So Maurice will now talk to you, Keiko, and Phil about the process today.
Thanks, Susana. Now, Keiko and Phil, shortly we're going to ask each of you to tell us separately about your main concerns and your issues, particularly in relation to Izzy and Jimmy, your children, okay? Look, we have one rule, and that is when one of you are speaking, the other one listens, okay? We want you to be respectful of each other. That's really one of the only rules that we have. Remember, you'll each have a turn to have your own say, and we will make sure that happens. Once we've heard from each of you, Susana and I will have some idea then of the issues that you want to explore and we need to attempt to resolve. We will summarise those for you. We might even use the whiteboard to summarise and put them there and prioritise those issues, and we'll be able to work through them together with the assistance of your lawyers here today. Remember that what's said today in the mediation is completely confidential, all right? So that you can feel very free to talk about the issues that really are troubling you, in the knowledge that it's not going to be used elsewhere at a later date. You both have very competent lawyers here with you today, and remember that if you feel the need to just talk to them separately, just let us know, and you have ample opportunity to do that. In fact, we may even end up going into what we call private sessions, where we just have a chat with you, Keiko and Michael and Phil and Jackie separately, in the event that we reach a stalemate. All right? Remember this, that if we do go into what we call those private sessions, whatever you say to us remains confidential unless you want us to let the other person know what's been said. All right? Remember that. If we do reach an agreement today, well, your lawyers are here, Jackie and Michael, and we can document any agreement that we reach. So Keiko, are you happy to proceed on that basis? Very good. And Phil, are you happy to proceed on that basis?
Thank you, Maurice. I think now we might ask Keiko to tell Phil about her concerns and what matters have brought her here today.
Thank you. And yes, so we came here today to talk about children. I would like to reach agreement with Phil about the children, because we have two children. Izzy is 8 years old and Jimmy is 18 months. And you want me to talk about my position? So I have been in Australia and feeling quite lonely because my home is Japan. And in Japan I have a mother her health is not good. And I would like to go back to Japan with my children, and my mother can't travel to Australia, and also our daughter, she misses my mother very much, and my daughter is she's more like a Japanese person, and she thinks Japan is her home, and she's not so settled in Australia. And if I can go back to Japan, I have a career in Japan, and I can go back to that. So when we came here, my husband Phil, he said it would only be for a few years, and we would go back to Japan. So and I would like to do that. And our children are very close to me because I'm looking after them most of the time. So that's me, yeah.
Thank you, Keiko. Michael, are there any issues or matters you'd like to raise for us today?
Thank you, Susana. Keiko has stated her position quite succinctly, so I won't speak too long as to it. We recognise that the Hague Convention has recently been entered into by Japan. It is now a signatory. Despite that fact, and I don't mean to be dismissive of your contentions today, Phil, it is a parenting matter at its heart, and because it is a parenting matter like any other, the same principles apply. Those matters that Keiko has raised, we say, would support her ultimate goal to move to Japan to live with her two children. She considers Japan her home. She would contend that she was the primary attachment figure to both children, having given up her career to live in Australia, ultimately, with Phil. The children, especially as Keiko has suggested, Izzy, the 8-year-old, identifies strongly with Japan and would, in Keiko's view, be better settled there. Izzy has, in particular, a close bond with the maternal grandparents who live in Japan. The maternal grandmother, as Keiko has suggested, is unwell and cannot move internationally. Keiko contends that there was an agreement reached between herself and yourself, Phil, such that you would eventually move back to Japan. In addition, Keiko has qualifications which aren't recognised in Australia. She is a doctor. She has those qualifications in Japan. She wishes now to resume her career as a doctor upon relocating to Japan. Keiko is here to find some common ground so that the relationship which Phil has with the children can continue. It can be a meaningful one, and for those purposes, Keiko is here to be as flexible as she can be in that regard. Unless there's anything else, those would be my opening remarks.
Thank you, Michael. If I can just then summarise your issues, Keiko, really it's about where Izzy and Jimmy will live and who they'll live with, whether it's Japan or whether it's here in Australia. All right, and I hear your issues are that your career in Australia has been on hold, really, and you have a desire to further that career.
Yes.
All right, and I understand that one of the children, Izzy, has been a little unsettled, and you're concerned about that.
That's right.
All right, and your parents aren't in good health, so they can't just come to Australia, and that's a concern for you as well. All right. Anything else I've missed, or are they the main issues that we need to talk about? And finally, as I understand it, you want to try and avoid legal proceedings and the expense and trauma of legal proceedings. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay, Phil, you've heard what Keiko and Michael have said. Now it's your turn. Let us know what your concerns are and what issues you want us to try and resolve this morning.
I don't want the children to live away from Australia. You know, Jimmy was born here. Jimmy was born in Australia. This is where we live now. It was always intended that we were going to live here. I don't know. I've had legal advice, and a good legal advice, and you can't take these children without my consent. You know, I travel for work. You know, do a bit of IT, and I'm pretty good at it. And you know, I'm away every now and then, a couple of weeks here and there. But if they were living in Japan, I wouldn't see them for months. You know. Oh. And she can work. She doesn't need to work, but she can work. She doesn't need to work. I earn a good salary. She can stay at my parents' place, rent-free. You know, maximum child support. Money has never been an issue. Money's not the issue here. These children need to stay here, and that's what the agreement was. That's what we're doing. You know, if she wants to take them back to Japan, how am I going to see them? What time am I going to have? So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry. I've come here today as part of the process, but she can't take the children without my consent.
Thanks, Phil. Jackie, is there anything further you'd like to add in relation to Phil's concerns?
Thank you, Susana. I'd just like to add just a couple of points. I think you've heard from Phil where he sees the issues and what his concern is. But just from a legal point of view, I'd just like to add just a couple of points. And that is particularly in relation to his relationship with the children, and that appears to have been missed a little bit from Keiko's side. I appreciate Keiko's concerns in terms of the extended family, in terms of her career, and in terms of her family. But that seems to miss the importance of the relationship for the children with their father. And that's particularly Phil's concern, is the importance of maintaining that relationship, as he sees it, almost impossibility of maintaining a proper relationship. Of course, some relationship can be maintained between Australia and Japan, but it's not the same. And he is particularly concerned to maintain that relationship, which nobody seems to be disputing is a good relationship. And from a legal point of view, the children and the father's relationship, we would say, is the more critical relationship and the more important one. Then, whilst, as I say, acknowledging Keiko's concerns, that's not the critical relationship, it's the father and the children. And the children have the right to a relationship with their father, and that needs to be kept in mind. And it was intended, as Phil said, that the parties would live in Australia. He's made the work arrangements, put those work arrangements in place for that to happen, and he wants to continue his relationship. And the law recognises that. The law recognises the importance of that relationship, and that's what is his key issue. And in his mind, based on the arrangements which have been put in place so far, and the very young age of Jimmy, we've got to keep in mind that Jimmy is only a very young child, and any kind of long-distance relationship for such a young child becomes very problematic. So that's where Phil is particularly concerned that if Keiko was to return to Japan with the children, that relationship would suffer. Hence his desire for the family to remain in Australia, and for him and the children to maintain their relationship post them living in the same house together.
Thanks, Jackie. And now I'll summarise some of Phil's concerns. What we're hearing from Phil is that he has a very close and loving relationship with the children.
Okay, we know you've asked for time, Phil and Keiko, to spend with your lawyers separately so that you can have a chat to them and get some advice about that. So we'll invite you shortly to go out to the separate rooms that we showed you before, and while you do that, we're going to write up on the whiteboard here those main issues that each of you want us to look at this morning. Okay? Happy with that? Phil, I just wanted to reassure you that anything you say to Susana and I will be treated in the strictest of confidence, and we won't disclose anything to Keiko unless you want us to do so. Okay?
I'm just really worried. I'm just extremely concerned. You know, young Jimmy's only 18 months and I'm concerned I'm not going to see those kids again.
Keiko, Michael has raised with us a concern you have about the confidentiality of this private session. And what I'd like to reassure you is that this session is totally confidential, and nothing you tell us will be conveyed outside of this room and to Phil, unless you authorise us, of course, to do so. So you should feel free during this session to raise any matters that you think might be relevant, which will assist, knowing that it is in confidence.
Okay, Keiko and Phil, we've now had the private sessions and we've now taken an opportunity to put those major concerns that you have to discuss this morning here on the whiteboard. You can see there are 4 major points that we've put up there. Now, Phil, I'm going to ask you first, which of those points is your major concern? Which is the one that you're most interested in talking about this morning? So that's the first one up there, the first item. Okay, we'll put a number 1 there.
I'll number that number 1,
Okay.
bearing in mind that these items are not in any priority generally, but this is Phil's most important issue for us to discuss. Keiko, which item on the board is of priority to you?
For me, number.
This item here?
Yes.
Good. And if you had to pick a second item, and this will be number 2, this item here, how can the children's relationship with both parents and extended families be fostered? Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Keiko. That's just wonderful that you've been able to reach an interim arrangement today, and that your lawyers will be able to document that for you both. It's wonderful to see that you've achieved an agreement which you've both considered your children's interests in doing that.
Thank you, Susana. And can I say I'd like to thank the lawyers for their involvement, Jackie and Michael, in the resolution that we've reached today.
In private session, the mediators received a proposal from Keiko. She recognises that Jimmy is very young and that he needs time to bond with his father. Keiko has offered to stay in Australia for a period of 2 years before moving to Japan with the children. Phil has accepted that proposal. They have also agreed that they will come back to a mediation in 18 months' time to discuss how the move can occur and the arrangements to be made for the children when they live in Japan. Michael, it was your client Keiko who sought this mediation. Why did she do that? And presumably, why did you advise her that it was a good idea?
Yes, Keiko was the moving party. She was the moving party for the purposes of this mediation because I've advised her that given that the Hague Convention now applies for Japan, she is required before relocating to either obtain an order of the court or the consent of the other parent. So she, as a matter of procedure, in the Australian regulations, is required to obtain a certificate from somebody appropriately qualified to say that mediation has been at least attempted as a pre-action step prior to commencing an application, which is what is otherwise required in the absence of consent. So apart from genuinely wishing to see whether there can be resolution as to a rather substantive parenting issue, there is a procedural aspect of it as well.
Jackie, why did Phil agree to participate in this mediation?
Justin, I have to say that Phil was reluctant to participate in the mediation because from his point of view, there are benefits to him in Keiko and the children staying longer in Australia. There is a risk to him that if court proceedings are commenced, that she may possibly be successful in being allowed to relocate to Japan with the children, which would damage his relationship with the children because it would become so much more distant. But ultimately he agreed to attend the mediation because he is hopeful that they will be able to communicate in the future about their children. And the risk with court proceedings is that as a result of what's said, as a result of the evidence that's given, that it becomes very difficult for them to communicate effectively and maintain a relationship in the future. And of course, on top of that, I spoke with him about the cost of court proceedings, about the emotional difficulties, the emotional trials that go with court proceedings. And ultimately, you can never be entirely sure how mediation might resolve and whether it will resolve, so it's always worth a shot. So ultimately he agreed, I have to say somewhat reluctantly, but he agreed because if it can resolve through mediation, that is this dispute, then it's better for everyone in the long run, and hence he's here.
And Jackie, what is the role of the lawyer in a mediation such as this?
Justin, I see my role, and indeed Michael's role as Keiko's lawyer in any mediation like this, as twofold, I guess. The first aspect is to ensure that that Phil's position, as I understand it, is effectively and properly communicated to the mediators and to Keiko. He and I have talked at length about his both legal rights and practical hopes, and whilst it is his chance today to express his thoughts and desires and concerns, it's my role to ensure that that is properly communicated. And then the second aspect, as I see of my role, is to give him legal advice along the way, because we never quite know with the mediation where it might end up. And if he is looking at a compromise, it's my role to ensure that he understands the effect of his compromise and the full meaning of his compromise. And then, of course, the supplementary to that legal role is to actually document the agreement, if there is one, and ensure that that is documented in accordance with his desired outcome of the agreement.
Michael, if an agreement was reached, how would that agreement be put into effect in a legal sense?
We would ensure that the agreement, if one was reached, be reflected in a set of documentation orders in a form approved by the Australian courts and made eventually sealed by the Australian courts. If the agreement was such that Keiko be entitled to relocate to Japan with the children, I'd be advising Keiko that we should obtain some specialist legal advice from Japanese lawyers or lawyers who are experts in the Japanese legislation. We don't profess to be experts, and there might be implications of this agreement that might be reached.
There are obvious advantages to people who are able to settle their case by way of mediation. The most obvious is that they both end up with a result that they can live with, and they can then move on with their lives. They also avoid being caught in a system which strains to get through the number of cases that are requiring judicial determination. They avoid the cost of expensive litigation and the risk of being involved after a judge has made a decision in the appellate processes.